Argue like a lawyer 1. Stay calm under pressure. Think about the last time someone pushed your buttons. Maybe it was a family member who knew exactly what to say to get under your skin. Maybe it was a co-worker who made a sly comment that cut deeper than you wanted to admit. Or maybe it was a stranger who disrespected you in public. In those moments, what did you feel first? Heat in your chest, tension in your jaw, the urge to snap back without thinking. That's the trap most people fall into, reacting instead of responding. But when you argue like a professional, you know this. The person who loses their cool first loses control. Staying calm under pressure isn't about being emotionless. It's about being disciplined. It's about recognizing that when you let anger, frustration, or defensiveness take the wheel, you hand over the steering wheel of the conversation. Suddenly, they're driving and you're just along for the ride. Think of calmness as your anchor. When someone comes at you with hostility, their goal is to pull you into the storm with them. They want you to match their energy so they can justify their anger. But if you refuse, if you stay anchored in calm, they can flail, they can shout, they can throw every insult they can think of, and none of it moves you. That's real power. See, calmness under pressure does 2 things. First, it protects you. Your body isn't hijacked by stress. Your words aren't chosen recklessly. Your face doesn't betray weakness. You stay sharp, grounded, and steady. Second, it disarms them, because nothing is more frustrating to an angry person than someone who won't get angry back. They expect you to fight fire with fire, but when you choose water instead, you not only put out their flames, you also show everyone watching that you're the one in control. Here's the truth. People respect composure. You don't remember the loudest voice in the room. You remember the one who stayed steady, the one who never cracked under pressure. That's the person who earns trust. That's the person who gets taken seriously. But how do you get there? It's not magic, it's practice. The next time someone raises their voice, don't match it. Lower yours. If they speed up, slow down. If they push for an instant reaction, give yourself a pause. These small shifts send a massive signal. I'm not on your leash. You don't have to fill every silence with words. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is breathe, pause, and then speak. That pause is where your control lies. It tells the other person and yourself that you're choosing to respond, not to react. And here's the mindset shift that changes everything. Don't see pressure as a threat. See it as a test. Every heated moment is an opportunity to prove to yourself that you're stronger than your impulses. Pressure isn't there to break you. It's there to reveal you. Imagine a courtroom. The lawyer who slams the desk, yells at the judge, and loses composure. They lose credibility. But the lawyer who stands steady, voice controlled, arguments sharp, no matter how chaotic it gets. That's the lawyer the jury leans toward. That's the one people believe, and in your life you are that lawyer. Every conversation is your courtroom. So when the pressure rises, remind yourself, if I lose my calm, I lose my case. That's why calmness is not weakness. It's not passivity. It's strategy. It's discipline. It's strength under fire. And when you carry that with you, people start to realize something about you. You can't be shaken. You can't be manipulated. You can't be dragged into chaos you didn't choose. And that's the kind of strength that wins arguments without even raising your voice. 2. Listen more than you speak. Most people think winning an argument is about having the sharpest comeback, the fastest response, or the strongest words. But the truth is, the most powerful person in any conversation isn't the one who talks the most. It's the one who listens the best. Listening is underrated because it doesn't look flashy. You're not throwing punches with your words. You're not commanding the room with your volume. But here's what listening really does. It arms you with clarity. And clarity beats chaos every single time. Think about it. How often do arguments spiral because no one is actually hearing the other person? 2 people, both convinced they're right, both talking over each other, neither paying attention. That's not a conversation, that's just noise, and noise never changes minds. But when you listen, I mean really listen, with the intent to understand instead of just waiting for your turn to reply, everything shifts. You start picking up details the other person doesn't even realize they've revealed. You hear contradictions in their story. You notice the emotion beneath their words, frustration, fear, insecurity, things they didn't say directly, but said anyway. And once you catch that, you have the advantage. Lawyers know this better than anyone. In a courtroom, the most important part of cross-examination isn't the talking, it's the listening, because the moment you miss a detail, you miss your chance to strike. But when you're tuned in, when every word the other side speaks goes through your filter, you can dismantle an argument without raising your voice. You can guide the conversation where you want it to go. Here's the thing, listening isn't just about words, it's about presence. When you're locked in, when you nod, make eye contact, and show that you're actually paying attention, the other person feels it. And people crave that because most of the time they don't feel heard, and when you make them feel heard, their defenses lower. Suddenly, they're not fighting you, they're talking with you. That's how you turn conflict into connection. Now, let me clear something up. Listening doesn't mean agreeing. Listening doesn't mean surrendering your point. Listening is a strategy. You're not giving up ground, you're gathering information. And the more information you have, the stronger your position becomes. Think about the difference between two responses. The person who jumps in immediately, cuts off, reacts emotionally. They look insecure, desperate to be right. The person who pauses, listens, and then calmly responds with precision. They look confident, in control, and untouchable. Which one do you respect more? Exactly. And here's a secret most people miss. Listening can expose the weakness in the other person's argument without you having to say much at all. Sometimes just repeating back what someone said in their own words can make them realize how shaky their point really is. Because when their words are held up to the mirror, they don't sound as strong as they thought. Try it sometime. Instead of arguing back, repeat, "So what you're saying is," and reflect their point. Watch how often they stumble to clarify, backtrack, or soften their stance. That's not manipulation. That's the power of making them hear themselves. But to do this well, you have to silence your own ego in the moment. And that's hard, because we all want to defend ourselves instantly. We want to correct, to set the record straight, to fight back. But discipline is knowing your silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Every second you listen is another piece of evidence you gather. Every pause is another chance to strike with precision instead of flailing wildly. So, why does listening win? Because people don't walk away from arguments remembering who shouted the loudest. They walk away remembering who understood them. And when someone feels understood, they're more likely to shift their perspective. That's persuasion at its core. Listening makes you the calm, steady force in the room. Listening makes you the person others trust. Listening gives you the advantage of knowledge, and knowledge is leverage. So the next time you find yourself in a heated conversation, resist the urge to dominate. Instead, lean in, ask questions, let them talk, let them reveal what they don't even realize they're revealing. And when it's your turn to speak, your words will land harder, sharper, and with more authority than if you had rushed to fill the silence. Remember this, the one who listens the most speaks with the most power. And in the courtroom of life, power doesn't come from noise, it comes from knowing. 3. Use questions, not attacks. When most people argue, their instinct is to go on the offensive. They think the way to win is by hitting harder, talking louder, or throwing insults sharp enough to sting. But here's the truth, attacks don't persuade, they only trigger defense. And once someone goes into defense mode, their walls go up, their ears close, and the chance of you changing their mind drops to zero. That's why the most effective way to argue isn't to attack, it's to question. Questions are powerful because they shift the conversation. They take the pressure off you to prove and put the responsibility on the other person to explain. And when someone is forced to explain their position, they often expose weaknesses they didn't realize were there. Think about a courtroom. The lawyer who wins doesn't scream at the witness. They don't throw insults across the room. They ask questions, calm, sharp, pointed questions that peel back layers until the truth comes out. And the jury doesn't side with the one who yells. They side with the one who calmly led them to clarity. That's how you argue with questions. Let's break it down. When you attack, the other person feels cornered. Their brain sees you as a threat, and the natural human response to threat is fight or flight. They'll either come swinging back harder, or they'll shut down completely. Either way, you lose the chance to persuade. But when you ask questions, something different happens. The tension lowers. You're not saying, "You're wrong." You're saying, "Help me understand." That opens the door. That invites them to talk instead of defend, and in talking they reveal what you need. Here's an example. Instead of saying, "That's ridiculous, you don't know what you're talking about," try asking, "Can you walk me through why you see it that way?" What makes you so confident in that conclusion? How would that work if we applied it to this situation? See the difference. One approach creates a wall, the other opens a path, and don't underestimate what questions do to the room. When you ask, you look calm, collected, and curious. You don't look like someone who's desperate to win. You look like someone who's in control. That confidence pulls people in. Now, here's the beautiful part. People are more convinced by the conclusions they come to themselves than by the ones forced on them. When you use questions, you're guiding them to see the holes in their own argument. They'll say something, and in hearing themselves, they'll start to realize it doesn't add up. That realization lands harder than anything you could have shouted at them. But here's the key: your tone matters. A question asked with sarcasm isn't a question. It's just another attack dressed up as one. If you say, "Oh really, and how's that supposed to work?" in a mocking tone, they'll hear the attack louder than the words. The power of questions only works if they're genuine. You've got to approach it like a detective, not like a critic. It's also about patience. Questions take time. You've got to let them answer fully, even if you think you already know where they're going. Interrupting ruins the strategy. Let them walk themselves out until their point falls apart naturally. And remember, questions don't just reveal their argument, they reveal the emotions behind their argument. Sometimes what someone says isn't really what they mean. A question like, "Why does this matter so much to you?" can uncover the fear, insecurity, or past experience that's fueling their anger. And once you see that, you can respond to the root, not just the surface. Here's the bottom line. Attacks make enemies, but questions create openings. So the next time you're in a heated argument, resist the urge to strike. Instead, get curious, ask, don't accuse, guide, don't shove. And watch how quickly the energy of the conversation shifts, because questions don't just win arguments, they win respect. They show that you're confident enough not to fight for dominance. They show that you're smart enough to let the truth reveal itself. And they show that you're steady enough to keep control without ever raising your voice. In the end, remember this: the sharpest weapon in an argument isn't your attack, it's your curiosity. 4. Stick to the facts when arguments heat up. Most people run straight to emotion. They raise their voice, they throw in dramatic statements, they exaggerate to make a point. But here's the problem with emotion: it shifts like the wind. It can be powerful for a moment, but it doesn't hold steady. What does hold steady? Facts. Facts are the foundation of any strong argument. They're solid, they're verifiable, they don't depend on mood or opinion. They stand whether you feel good, bad, angry, or calm. And when you base your argument on facts, you're standing on ground that can't be easily shaken. Think about a courtroom. A lawyer can be passionate, persuasive, and charismatic. But if they don't have evidence to back it up, their case crumbles. Juries don't decide on flair alone, they decide on facts. The documents, the timelines, the witnesses, the evidence. That's what sticks. And in life, your conversations work the same way. Here's why facts are so powerful: they cut through noise. In an argument, emotions swirl like smoke, clouding judgment. But facts are like opening a window. Suddenly the room clears. Everyone can see more clearly, and clarity is what persuades. Now, sticking to the facts doesn't mean you have to sound robotic or detached. It means you lead with truth, not with exaggeration. You say what can be proven, not what can be dramatized. because exaggeration may win you a reaction, but it won't win you respect. Here's an example. Imagine a co-worker misses a deadline. Instead of saying, "You never do your work on time," which is emotional and exaggerated, you stick to the fact, "This project was due on Friday and it came in on Tuesday." That delay pushed back the rest of the team's work. Notice the difference. The first statement attacks the person. The second simply points to the truth. And truth has a way of hitting harder than insult ever could. Facts also protect you. When you argue based on feelings alone, you're vulnerable. Someone can challenge your feelings, dismiss them, or twist them. But when you argue based on facts, you're bulletproof. Facts can be checked, and if you've done your homework, the truth backs you up every time. Another reason to stick to facts: it shows discipline. Anyone can rant, but not everyone can hold their ground with evidence. When you show that your words are rooted in reality, people trust you more. They may not like what you're saying, but they'll have a harder time dismissing it. Now, some people will still try to pull you into emotional battles. They'll throw accusations, insults, or distractions. Don't take the bait. Instead, come back to center with facts. If they say, "You don't care about this team," don't argue feelings. Point to your actions. "I've stayed late 3 nights this week to make sure we hit our targets." That's a fact, and it speaks louder than defending yourself emotionally ever could. Here's something else facts do. They calm the temperature of the room. Emotion fuels fire, but facts cool it down. When you present facts clearly, you set a tone of reason. You show that you're not here to fight, you're here to solve, and that kind of energy is contagious. But let's be real, facts alone don't always persuade. People are human. They want to feel, not just think. That's why the real skill is blending facts with empathy. You anchor in truth, but you deliver it in a way that acknowledges the other person's feelings. For example, "I hear that you're frustrated, but here's what the numbers show." That combination is powerful. You validate emotions while guiding the conversation back to solid ground. In the end, sticking to the facts keeps you untouchable. It keeps you from being dragged into the chaos of emotion. It keeps you credible in every room you walk into. And it gives your words weight that lasts longer than the heat of the moment. So when you argue, don't swing wildly with feelings. Stand steady with facts, because emotions can be dismissed. Opinions can be debated. But facts endure, and the person who stands with facts is the person who stands unshaken. 5. Pause before you respond. In the heat of an argument, silence feels uncomfortable. The moment someone throws a jab or makes a bold statement, we feel pressure to respond instantly, to defend ourselves, to correct them, to prove we're not caught off guard. But here's the truth: quick reactions often cost us clarity. And in arguments, clarity is everything. That's why one of the sharpest skills you can develop is the ability to pause before you respond. Think of the pause as your buffer. It's the space between stimulus and response. It's where you regain control of your thoughts before your emotions hijack your words. Without the pause, you're running on instinct, and instinct in heated conversations usually means defensiveness, sarcasm, or regret. With the pause, you're choosing strategy over impulse. Picture a courtroom again. A lawyer doesn't jump at every objection, doesn't rush to answer every question the second it's asked. They pause, they think. They let silence work for them. That pause signals control. It shows the jury, the judge, and the opposing counsel that they're not shaken. And when they finally speak, their words land with precision. You can do the same thing in your everyday arguments. Here's why the pause is powerful. First, it buys you time. Even just 3 seconds of silence can be enough to take a deep breath, gather your thoughts, and decide what you actually want to say. Instead of blurting something you'll regret, you deliver something that carries weight. Second, the pause unsettles the other person. Most people expect an immediate reaction. When you don't give it, they start to feel the silence. And in that silence, they sometimes reveal even more. They talk themselves in circles, they soften their tone, or they realize they pushed too hard, all because you didn't bite. Third, the pause changes the entire tone of the exchange. Imagine two people yelling back and forth, voices layered on top of each other, chaos. Now imagine one person staying calm, letting silence sit, then responding with a measured, thoughtful statement. Suddenly, the energy shifts. The one who paused looks like the adult in the room, and people always listen to the adult in the room. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but won't silence make me look weak? Not at all. Silence makes you look strong. Weakness is being reactive. Strength is being selective. Silence isn't surrender, it's control. It's saying, I'll respond on my terms, not yours. But here's the catch. The pause only works if you're intentional with what comes after it. Pausing just to stall and then exploding doesn't help. The pause has to lead to a response that's clear, calm, and calculated. Otherwise, the silence loses its power. So how do you practice this? Start small. The next time someone frustrates you, don't rush. Count to 3 in your head. Take a sip of water. Breathe. Let the moment stretch a little longer than feels natural. Then answer. You'll be amazed at how different your response sounds when it's filtered through even a few seconds of calm. And here's another benefit of the pause. It communicates respect. When you don't jump in to interrupt, when you let the other person finish, you're showing them that you value their words enough to actually consider them. Even if you completely disagree, that respect builds credibility. They may not like your position, but they'll have a harder time dismissing you as hot, headed, or reactive. Think of the pause as punctuation. If you fire words nonstop, your point gets lost in the noise, but when you pause, you give your words weight. You give the listener time to digest. You make your argument not just heard, but felt. In every argument, the person who controls the tempo controls the outcome. The pause lets you set the tempo. It slows everything down. It gives you space to think and gives your words the power to land like a hammer instead of a scatter of sparks. So the next time you're in an argument, remember, you don't win by being the fastest to speak. You win by being the wisest to respond. And wisdom lives in the pause, because when you pause before you respond, you prove something important. You're not controlled by the chaos around you. You're in control of yourself. And that's the kind of control that wins every room you walk into. 6. Aim for connection, not destruction. When most people argue, their focus is on winning at all costs. They want the last word. They want to prove the other person wrong. They want to walk away feeling like they won. But here's the harsh reality. If winning the argument means destroying the relationship, you didn't actually win. You just burned a bridge you may never get back. The true goal of arguing like a professional isn't destruction. It's connection. It's not about humiliating the other person. It's about persuading them. It's not about walking away with their pride in pieces. It's about walking away with respect still intact. That's the difference between a fight and an argument. A fight creates enemies. An argument, done well, creates understanding. Think about it this way. Every argument has 2 levels. The first is the surface, the words, the points, the background. Fourth, the second is deeper, the relationship, the trust, the bond. If you focus only on the surface and scorch the other person just to win, you might walk away with the points but lose the connection. And connections are far harder to rebuild than arguments are to win. A lawyer knows this. In a courtroom, the point isn't to destroy the opposing counsel. It's to persuade the jury. It's to win people over, not to leave scorched earth behind. Because persuasion requires trust, and trust can't live where humiliation takes root. So, how do you argue in a way that aims for connection? First, check your motive. Before you respond, ask yourself, am I trying to prove them wrong, or am I trying to make progress? If your only motive is to feel superior, you'll choose words that cut. But if your motive is to build understanding, you'll choose words that bridge. Second, separate the person from the problem. Too often, we attack the person instead of addressing the issue. That's when arguments get personal and destructive. Instead of saying, you're irresponsible, say, this deadline was missed and it created a problem for the team. One attacks the person's character. The other addresses the behavior. And here's the truth. People are far more willing to change a behavior than to defend an attack on their character. Third, aim to leave the door open. Even if you strongly disagree, end the conversation in a way that shows respect. That could sound like, "I don't agree with you on this, but I appreciate hearing your perspective." Or, "We may not see eye to eye, but I value our relationship more than this argument." Those words don't make you weak, they make you wise. Because they remind both of you that the relationship matters more than the heat of the moment. Now, let's be clear. Aiming for connection doesn't mean rolling over. It doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means holding your ground firmly, but with respect. It means disagreeing without demeaning. It means arguing to persuade, not to punish. And here's something powerful. People rarely remember the exact words you said in an argument, but they always remember how you made them feel. If they walk away feeling belittled, humiliated, or crushed, they won't remember your points, they'll remember the pain. But if they walk away feeling respected, even in disagreement, they'll remember your composure. They'll remember your steadiness, and that memory builds influence that lasts far longer than the argument itself. Think of your relationships like a courtroom you'll return to again and again. Every time you argue, you're either building credibility or losing it. If you go for destruction, you may win today's case, but lose the jury forever. If you go for connection, you not only win the moment, you set yourself up to be trusted in future conversations. That's long-term influence. So the next time you're tempted to throw the knockout punch in an argument, ask yourself, what do I really want here? Do I want to prove a point, or do I want to preserve a relationship? Most of the time, the relationship is worth more than the rush of being right. Aim for connection, not destruction, because arguments end, relationships continue. And when you argue with connection in mind, you don't just win moments, you win people. And that's the ultimate victory. Argue like a lawyer. We've walked through 6 powerful skills that can transform the way you handle conflict. Staying calm under pressure, listening more than you speak, using questions instead of attacks, sticking to the facts, pausing before you respond, and aiming for connection over destruction. Each one on its own can change the way you show up in a heated conversation, but together they form a complete strategy, a strategy that keeps you composed, credible, and persuasive no matter who's across the table from you. Because at the end of the day, arguments aren't about shouting louder or striking harder. They're about influence, they're about control, they're about showing that your discipline is stronger than their chaos. When you stay calm under pressure, you prove you can't be rattled. When you listen more than you speak, you gain knowledge that others miss. When you ask questions instead of attacking, you guide the other person to see the truth for themselves. When you stick to the facts, you keep your credibility untouchable. When you pause before responding, you control the tempo of the entire room. And when you aim for connection, not destruction, you leave every relationship stronger than you found it. That's what it means to argue like a lawyer. It's not about winning every battle. It's about winning respect. It's about walking away knowing you didn't just protect your point, you protected your character. So the next time you find yourself in conflict, remember this. Your goal isn't to win at all costs. Your goal is to lead with clarity, calm, and conviction. Because anyone can argue recklessly, but it takes discipline, strategy, and self-control to argue like a professional. And when you do that, you don't just win arguments, you win people. You win influence, you win trust, and those wins last far longer than any single debate ever could. That's real power, and it's in your hands.